This is a story about a dude named Lane. He moved to the mainland and bought one place to stay. And then one day he went, tried to rent them out. And then he became one real investor man.
Hey guys, it's Lane here with the Simple Passive Cash Flow Podcast. Please go to the website and sign up for the Hui Deal Pipeline Club for the 1,000th time. If you haven't signed up for it yet, you definitely don't listen to directions. Today I have Brent Kawakami. How's it going, Brent?
What's up, Lane?
We met online. I know that always sounds funny when I say it, but a couple years ago or something like that.
Yeah, it sounds about right. We were Facebook buddies for a while.
You reached out to me because you heard the whole ukulele thing, and you're from Hawaii too.
Yep.
At that time, we were both buying turnkey stuff.
Yeah, we were both in single family. I didn't do turnkey though. I was doing the whole buy a foreclosure, rent, fix up yourself, that kind of thing. And
I've kind of been following your trajectory along the way, and I thought we'd finally bring you on because you're still in the weeds and, trying to make your way up to multifamily. As we were talking earlier, we listen to a lot of podcasts at 2 or 3 times speed, and it's gonna sound like me talking like this all the time.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that we said was, a lot of these podcasts, when you hear these guys with 1,000, 2,000 units, it's so horrible advice. It's not practical and usable anymore. They're saying oh, use MySpace to get leads. And it's well, they don't even have that damn website anymore.
Yeah. And then the other part too is, you have these guys and they go on all the podcast circuit and they're telling the same story over and over again. And then it's almost like this godlike figure with all these units. And it's, how do I, the peon, even take the next steps to get there?
Right. But you're not a peon. You're better than that. So Brent, tell us how much cash flow are you making today and how you're doing it?
Generally, it's fluctuated over time. And to give you some quick background, so like you said, I grew up and was born and raised in Hawaii, and I was very much the, get good grades, go to college, have a good career type thing. And that's what I did. I went to the mainland, got a degree in engineering, got the job, and I had never had the entrepreneurial itch at all. I was very much the guy who's going to work 40 years, max out his 401k, have his IRA, and do all that thing. And so probably a couple years into my career, I got that itch of, hey, there's something more. I don't know if I really want to do this for the next 40 years. And so like most things, rich dad tends to be the gateway drug, into those things, right? Or the red pill.
Purple book.
And then so I started exploring a bunch of stuff. I went through different things like peer-to-peer investing, dividend stock investing. I got into gold and silver, started an internet business, went into infinite banking, which you've had that topic on before. And then ultimately settled on real estate, started doing single family rentals here in the Dallas area, ultimately started moving toward multifamily. And so my simple passive cash flow numbers kind of fluctuated over time, just based on, those investments and buying and selling real estate. Generally it's probably around a couple thousand a month, but kind of right now where I'm at, sort of that take one step back to try and take 2 steps forward as I try to jump into multifamily.
Right. So you got up to how many units of the single families did you get up to?
So I had 3 or 4 at one point, and then I had a multifamily as a passive at the same time. And then I slowly started selling the single family so I could try to focus on multifamily, which is kind of where I'm at now.
So this is all, you're still working a day job and very busy doing that, or?
Yeah. So I have a normal 9 to 5 job, which isn't more 9 to 5. It's more like 6 to 5, right? This is the side hustle. So I do a lot of things where, I'm waking up early, up before 4 p.m., do my exercise, get some stuff in on side hustle, and then go to the day job. And then same thing doing it late at night. So, it's definitely, I know it's simple passive, but at the same time, there's definitely work involved in putting the time in, trying to get there.
Let's go back to, when you first read that purple book. How long ago was that? A lot of people they say well, I want to do multifamily, but no, it takes a while to get to that point.
Yeah. So on a timeline, it was probably around 2010, 2011, we'll say. And then I went through all these different experiments and looking at these different aspects. I probably didn't buy my first single family until about 2012. So probably 1 to 2 years before I even got in that realm. And then I didn't start getting into multifamily until about 2015. So definitely it's been a slow progression as I've kind of learned more and figured out what works and what doesn't.
So then, you're trying all these things like gold and silver, stocks, peer-to-peer lending. I think this is very consistent from what I see. Guy gets frustrated at work, guy goes home, instead of guy Googling how to hit on girls, he figures out how to build wealth, and he sees all this kinds of stuff.
Yeah. And, it's the same thing. Like you end up, signing up for investment newsletters, end up joining mentorship groups or, other educational groups, and, watching YouTube videos on things like that, watching webinars and, podcasts and all that type of thing. So it's kind of just and I still do that now, but it's sort of a constant trying to soak up stuff as you're trying to figure this thing out.
So how long were you doing the single family home thing?
So I started in 2012, and then I got a few renos under my belt, and it was kind of a, hey, buy one every year type thing. And then it was around 2015 when I started getting multifamily. So I ended up selling them off. And so it was in 2016 when I ended up selling them all. So probably the span of maybe 4 years, give or take, doing single family. It was the whole, I found a foreclosure or wholesale deal, that type of thing, needed the kind of thing here in the Dallas area back then was like, the $60,000 home that, you put 20 grand in, and, it's ARV is 100, those types of things. And, it hits all the standard, 1% rule, all those types of things. And, it worked out well. I mean, I probably was making somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 or $500 a month per house, I give or take, cash flow. So, it was solid investment, but, ultimately, I kind of had the aha moment to start to move to multifamily.
Yeah. What was it that like ultimately made you move? Cause like for me, it was like, okay, you do all this work, spend 2 months getting all this stuff to the lender, doing all this due diligence for what, $300 a cash flow a month, right? Like it just wasn't working.
Yeah. So I think the aha moment was, I kind of always knew multifamily was the way to go. It's kind of that, progression of the real estate investor, but I always figured like, hey, I'll get to my 10 limit max, on my single family houses, and then I'll think about it, sort of thing. But I think the aha moment really happened when, I was looking for another house actually at the time, to add to the portfolio. And I kind of thought about it, and I was like, adding another $300 a month cash flow is really not going to drastically change my life. I mean, it's great, right? I'm not going to say no and everything. But if I want to go fast and scale quicker, I have to make larger gains. And, I've been researching multifamily, and when you see sort of the disposition events that happen, and you get on an investment and, now you're turning 50K into 100, 200, whatever it is, that's where you're like, okay, that's where you can make some moves and life change. And I think that's what kind of was the impetus for that light switch, if you want to call it. Yeah, that was one of the Han Solo moments, I guess.
You mentioned that whole, I'm going to get 10 Fannie Mae loans. I don't know where people get this in their head. Like, I don't know why you want to get 10 Fannie Mae. Like, what's the magic number with that? Like, I don't understand it. Like,
because people, well, you hear that in different trainings and stuff, but then you hear all these people who have like 50 or 70 or 80 houses. So I think it's just some like arbitrary limit that, some of the education out there has. And it's sort of, for me personally at the time, was just sort of, that's kind of what I thought. And I was like, well, I'll get there and then I'll figure out what the next step is.
Yeah. So at some point, people kind of get off that train, and just that was your Han Solo moment where you realized that you need to transition. So what was, you still were doing the single family or in that train, but how did you transition? It wasn't an abrupt thing where it just...
No. So I still had the single families, and then I ended up getting hooked up with a local lead investor here in the Dallas area. Reached out to him, had coffee and all that. And then I ended up investing passively in his deal. And that's kind of what got things started. And, it's that whole, to me personally, doing that and initially was a great way to kind of see a deal from the inside. Obviously, you're not doing as much because you're a passive, but on the flip side, you're still seeing financials, you're still seeing the reports that the lead sends out. And then too, as you invest in other deals and see other leads, you kind of get a feel for, okay, what are the things I like? What are the things I don't like? That kind of thing. So that was kind of the step. That was the kind of the step, just investing passively and then kind of moving on from there.
Yeah. So did you end up joining these guys, or you just kept networking? What was like the next step after?
Yeah. So I kept networking, invested in another passive deal with another lead that I met through him. And then, you make the circuits of, there's all these groups out there that have education. There's obviously all the online stuff like Bigger Pockets and things like that. But, I never really had into my mind that, I wanted to try and do my own deal. At first, it was kind of a slow and gradual step, really. To be honest with you, what kind of led to it was sort of a right time, right place thing where I met potential partner. It's kind of like, what is that saying? When the student is ready, the teacher arrives type thing. And so that was kind of what, started the next steps.
Is that the partner, or is it the student or the mentor?
Both. I'd say both. It's a mentor and a partner. So
yeah, but that wouldn't be possible unless you were physically out networking and out after your bedtime.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, because the thing, especially in multifamily, that I think was the big difference from single family is you have to get out, right? You have to go to the network event.
What?
I
can't just troll on these Facebook groups with all these people and just message them blindly.
Yeah, you have like those Facebook groups that have like 500 people, and then then you get these people who one-off try to introduce themselves. Hey, I'm looking to partner with someone to do a deal.
Yeah, I'm looking for someone to be a KP.
Yeah, exactly, right. Hey, if you got deals, send them to me, right?
Yeah.
So, but you gotta, it's one of those things. You gotta get out. You gotta go to meetups. You gotta go to conferences. I'm an engineer like you are, and I'm a natural introvert, so that's not easy. But you gotta get out from. If you listen to another podcast along the topic, one of the guys on there will always say you got to get out from behind the computer. This business is something you got to do, meet people to do. So
right, and I'll say, like, I have this other secret group. It's called Introverts and Entrepreneurship. It's just kind of this fun like meetup group that I have, because as an owner you're allowed 3 meetup groups, so I have one of them just as a throwaway, and that's just it's so many people in that it's crazy. But like, I've gone to some of these meetings and it's like introverts make the best entrepreneurs, like the best salespeople, because they listen. They don't, they're not just, hey man, I got a deal, or you need this, or like,
that's awesome. I think you need to invite me to that group.
Yeah. Yeah. So you found the right people, and then you just like, tell me what you're doing today. 'Cause you're kind of in that, you're grinding away, right? You're in that, looking for deals, analyzing deals.
Just to kind of list some general things off. I mean, so I joined a formal mentorship program, which is something that I think, especially multifamily, it's almost, I don't want to say it's a requirement, but it's definitely a business where you gotta get around the right people that kind of are within that circle. I'm regularly contacting brokers for deals and signing up for lists and calling on deals, looking at deals to underwrite and evaluate. I'm scheduling in-person meetings with both potential investors and and brokers as well. In addition to calling, I'm taking the time to in other markets, so I'm in the Dallas market, but I'm looking in other markets too. So I'm taking the time to fly out there and meet with folks, right? And I'm taking a day off from, my day job, every year now to go look at a property, for example. So doing that, doing tours, trying to be on Bigger Pockets and LinkedIn and Facebook and all that stuff, trying to, I'm really bad at it, but it's kind of like how Gary Vee always says, you got to make daily deposits kind of in those realms. I said, going to meetups, going to conferences. And then, back to the partner thing, meeting the right folks, and then kind of finding a couple folks who complement my skills and can help me get there. So it's definitely a grind, I'd say.
Yeah. I mean, how many deals a month do you say you analyze these days? I mean, some of you just throw away.
Yeah. There's the whole there's the ones you look at immediately and know you're gonna trash it. There's the ones you look at and kind of do a quick and dirty, analysis just to see if it's worth looking deeper. And then there's obviously ones that there's the ones that, you know, you do a full analysis and maybe look into.
What are some things that, like, you know, that you're looking for that you may actually pull out the spreadsheet and do that quick and dirty?
So, you know, it's the typical, you know, criteria thing. You know, it's pretty kind of a bread and butter, you know, class CB, you know, 75 plus units, ideally, you know, pitch roof, individual HVAC, you know, all those types of things. I mean, that's kind of the first filter. I'll look at stuff anyway, just, you know, to do a quick and dirty, just because I'm newer, so I can get practice at it. You know, so I do my mentor and partner, he has a little kind of app deal that he made that, you know, kind of does a quick look at stuff. And so I'll run through that, you know, it takes 10 minutes really. And it's kind of just a flag of, hey, should I look at it deeper? So I'll do that. I'll do that a lot. I mean, I'm doing that every day, to be honest with you, at least 1 or 2 a day, I'd say.
Yeah. So what will, like, once you put in like the quick and dirty, is that like expenses, just high level income?
Yeah, it's high level, like gross potential rent, using some rules of thumb, you know, in terms of economic occupancy, in terms of, you know, rules of thumb on expenses, things like that. All you really need is sort of what is the GPR, what is the other income, you know, what is the, you know, general cap rate for that area, and then using that and just comparing it against, you know, what they're asking for. And then, you know, it's kind of are we even in the ballpark or not? Right. And so, you know, that kind of thing. And then from there, I'll figure out, okay, do I need to look at it further?
Right. And I guess we'll go backwards to the whole, you know, joining up a group. I'll say some of the benefits are, you know, you need partners to do this, because a lot of the times to qualify for these loans, especially if you're going after non-recourse loans, you need the network, the liquidity, but you also need the experience.
Yeah, and you got to find the partners who have the experience to be able to do that. And then, you know, the other thing too about, you know, those groups, I'd say is, you know, you kind of have the ecosystem built as far as like, quote unquote, the team, right? Because you know, obviously you always hear you know, hey, this is a team sport, and it is. And when you walk in there, you almost have, I don't want to say an instant credibility, so to speak, but you already have kind of like a built ecosystem of resources, you know, whether it's a lender, brokers, property managers, et cetera. And then, you know, you can use that to kind of leverage, you know, against, you know, hey, I'm a new guy, I don't know anybody, right? So,
yeah, like, or I'm part of these guys that close $50 trillion worth of real estate. I mean, whether it's true or not, kind of parlay other people's names.
Yeah, you know, the 4 most important words are my partners and I, right? So
I will say, like, some of the downsides to some of these groups is if you don't have that much money, you know, let's face it, these groups aren't cheap, right? It's a barrier to entry. So yeah, for sure. And so, you know, I think the thing there too is, like, you have to look at it as investment, I think, for one, right? And then you also have to think about it too, where if you're going into it, especially if you're doing it to where, like, you're planning on doing your own deal, you're not just being passive, you really have to go into it knowing that you're going to commit, right? Because obviously you're spending the dollars, but that doesn't mean, you know, deals are going to get served up to you on a silver platter. Right.
And so you kind of have to have that, to me, you kind of have to have the mindset already going in, hey, I'm going to get this stuff done.
Yeah. I mean, so some people, like, call me and they just want to be a limited partner. And, like, I tell them, well, if you're not looking to invest more than like 400 or 500,000, like, I mean, it's not going to be worth it to spend your money on a mentorship, I feel like.
Yeah. And then it's like, well, that money you spent, you know, that could have been spent on you doing, you know, investing in something, right?
Right. And not to mention, like, the time you're spending right now. I mean, it's like most people, that's the killer right there. They got the money, but they don't have the time to invest in this stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Because what are you doing now? Like, so you go to work, you come home, is it like a couple hours? How do you?
So I wake up at 4 a.m. Every day, and then I work out in the morning, and then I probably spend an hour and a half, you know, working on this stuff in the morning, which is nice because that's when I can really, you know, it's quiet. You know, I don't have to worry about calls and things like that. Then I'll get to work usually around 6:30. No one's in the office yet, so I can get my day job done, you know. And then when I come home from work, I have a family, so I try to spend time with them. I have a 7-month-old, a new dad, so, you know, that's awesome. And then, you know, later in the evening, I'm doing more of it, right? And during lunch, I may be making calls to brokers or, you know, potential investor. I may run out during my lunch to go meet someone on that instance, or, you know, I may be doing after work. And then, like I said, there's times where I'm taking a day off to go do stuff, whether it's to tour property or fly out somewhere. So
yeah. How's that at work? Is it like you got to kind of keep it within work hours or out on during breaks, or is it?
the good part for me is that, so, you know, I'm an engineer, I'm an exempt worker. I don't have to punch a clock. It's not necessarily a real stringent thing. Now I still do my job, I get it done, and I'm not sacrificing time there for, you know, for some of the stuff, obviously. You know, and part of it too is like, that's the right thing to do, right? I mean, that's my job. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, it's just a struggle, to be honest. You just kind of manage your time and figure things out and all that. So
one of these questions I had here, what's your worst life or business moment, and what did you do after? Maybe somebody can glean a lesson learned from this.
So first off, I like to say, fortunately, knock on wood, I haven't had like some, you know, dramatic failure, you know, where I lost a ton of money or something like that. And so, you know, knock on wood, not yet anyway, I guess.
Right.
I always had like the crappy issues you have with, you know, with single families where, you know, maybe it's a needy tenant or, you know, an unexpected repair that kind of sucks. Nothing as bad as that one rental you were talking about, the $20,000 guy who skipped or whatever it was. So I didn't
yeah, there was another one that's later, but
sorry to bring up bad memory. But
it's okay.
But I'd say, so one kind of lesson learned I had, it was kind of in that period when I was transitioning from the single family to multifamily, back a year or two ago. So I had one of my single families, I had a tenant, you know, they weren't going to renew their lease. And so they were going to move out. Good tenant, you know, nothing crazy. And so at the time I had already invested passively in multifamily. And I was thinking, okay, do I sell it? Do I just, you know, throw another tenant back in? And my wife was a good read on me and read on people. You know, she told me you need to sell the thing so you can focus on, you know, this other stuff. But I kind of took the easy way out in terms of, no, you know, I'll just get clean crew and get another tenant in there, which for me, like at that point was like, I don't want to say it's easy, but it was kind of the norm, right? I was stuck in sort of that status quo. And then inevitably it ended up being like the worst tenant I ever had, of course, right? They paid the rent, but they were just incredibly needy, incredibly picky about stuff. And then I ended up just selling the place, you know, as a turnkey, like 3-4 months later after that. And so kind of my lesson learned there, you know, is funny, is listen to your wife. Just kind of funny. But, you know, as far as like related to all investment stuff, like she's a much better I don't know if you want to call it the emotional intelligence thing, but she's a much better read on people, I'd say, especially like, hey, you know, I don't know if you want to talk to that guy, or I don't know if you should partner or go into that guy's program, or, you know, even read on me, right? She knew she was a better read on me on what I should have done, just me emotionally at that time.
Right. Your blind spots. And
yeah, exactly. I think that's definitely a thing. Sorry, no crazy crazy stories outside of that.
Yeah, no, I've heard of that. Like the wives are just better at picking up at those intangibles, where you and I are just sort of on the autistic spectrum, being engineers. We just can't really like pick up those subtleties, I guess. I don't know. But you know, it makes sense, right? Because I think you and I, you know, we had a good job and we didn't really take too big of a chances. I mean, we're kind of weenies in terms of risk. I mean, look at this, even the stuff now that you're doing, you're just kind of going after stabilized properties with non-recourse loans. I mean,
yeah,
it's, you know, you're going after singles and doubles, no home runs, really.
Yeah, and I think the thing just, you know, because you always hear the things about like, you know, hey, you know, I never invest with someone who hasn't had a big failure, or, you know, what's that saying where it's like, you know, I succeed because I fail. And I'm kind of like, I don't want to fail. I'm going to do everything in my power not to limit that. And obviously the whole point of those messages are something's going to happen. You got to be able to pick yourself up, or you got to be able to charge through it and learn from it, which is fine. But it's kind of like, I'm going to do everything possible so that I don't have a huge catastrophic failure, you know, because that's what's going to put me back, right? If I hit singles and doubles, you know, and I can keep doing that, I mean, that's the guys, and, you know, I'm not a huge baseball fan, but those are the guys that are in the league for 20 years, right?
Right. I mean, the guys who's up on the stage saying these huge like risks they did and huge catastrophes, like it sells tickets, right? Like, the singles and doubles, they don't really sell, like they're not that cool. And I think for the same reason that, like I say, don't quit your day job, you don't see all the people who crashed and burned. Like you don't see any. It's a self-selecting bias, the person standing on top of the stage saying that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're like, hey, quit your job so you can focus on this. It's the fear is what's going to make you succeed. And it's like,
I don't know,
I don't know about that.
I'm like the same way. I'm like, hell no, man, I'm not going to, like, I want to keep my day job. Like,
I'm 100% on that.
I mean, you've been listening to this podcast, and there's a reason. Like, simple passive cash flow is about being passive and not taking chances. You listeners, you guys have money, you guys worked hard, you guys don't need to be taking these chances that other people do.
What is it, like every big, I don't want to say guru, but even like Warren Buffett's like, what is rule one? Don't lose money, right? So do everything you can to not break rule one.
Current 2-week experiment that you're working on and a 6-month project.
So the 2-week experiment is more personal, I'd say, and I'd say there's more 2-week experience that are personal for me. Right now, it's kind of weird, but I'm sleep training my son, which I guess if you relate to investing, if I can get him to sleep through the night, that'll definitely help me do more work at night. So the 6-month for me, back to trying to get in the multifamily, it's to do a deal to sponsor, 75+ unit BC property. That's my one thing. That's my focus. And that's everything, everything you do, what's going to make that easier, one step closer type thing. So
you've done the LP side.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be the guy, the lead. You don't want to just be like part of the general partnership, sending out emails here and there. You want to be the guy, boots on the ground.
Yeah. The operator, the airplane analogy is pretty popular in those, where it's like, I want to go from being the passenger to the guy flying the plane.
Right. No jump seat.
No jump seat.
Yeah. So what is your simple passive cash flow that you're shooting for these days? What's the...
I'd say if I could get to like 10K a month, I'd be happy with that. I mean, that's probably small for some people, but I'm not, I'm a pretty simple guy. If I did that, I'd be perfectly happy. So I guess, you normally ask if you double that, right? So
right. If
I double that, I'd be golden. If that happened, I'd probably, maybe I'd consider moving back to Hawaii. I know you've been tempting.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you. What's the number to get you back to Hawaii so you can just hang out with me and hang out at the beach?
Yeah, maybe if we get to 20. But yeah, you've been tempting me with the pics of your beautiful office view and the job openings there. Yeah.
Although we wouldn't go to the beach, we'd probably just go to like Starbucks with our laptops or something.
Yeah, see, and that's the thing. Like if I were, it's that whole like, how would you design your day, right? So I'd still wake up early. I'd still work out. I probably, with my son's little now, but I'd love to be able to spend time with him, in the mornings, take him to school, that kind of thing. And I'd still like, in the mornings, I'd still like want to work on investments, look for deals, operate stuff. Like you said, go to the coffee shop and work, do stuff, have lunch or with someone, potential partner, investor, something like that. I probably play golf more, but yeah,
Well, think about it, man. We can both take the kids with our laptops to the park, and everybody would kind of wonder and question what we're doing there together all the time.
Well, and that's the thing too. Like, so the goal of obviously everyone is to get your simple passive cash flow number and quit the rat race, right? But then the thing is, like, like when that happens and you left the day job and, when you and I are lying on the beach doing that, then every one of our friends are like, what the heck are those guys doing? But then they don't realize that, hey, they've been working like 2 jobs almost for 10 years.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be cool to like, traffic's so bad in Hawaii is like, where everybody's piling to get on the on-ramp to like do like a workout outside every morning at the same time. And people are like, what does that guy do? Like, how does he get to do that every time? I see him working out all the time.
He owns a bunch of real estate. That's probably what he does. Right?
Yeah. You better invest in his deals. Is something that you recently thought about burning your cash on for a time savings or improvement in quality of life?
So one thing I have been experimenting on that is, like these meal services. So not like the box with the recipes and everything, but the whole, like, they're actually like they're pre-portioned, packaged, and prepared that they ship. And the thing I've been experimenting with that is because I'll be honest, while I like cooking, I really don't, I'm the type of guy that can eat the same thing every day. And so it's kind of nice not having to think about when I come home, what I'm going to eat, especially with me wanting to do all this other stuff. Right. So it's almost a huge time saver where I can just, all right, and it's clean food too. So, I can just pop in the microwave, eat, and go on with all these other things. I definitely say, just as a side note for kind of this question, there's a pretty good book called Happy Money, which I really like. I forget who the author is, but it talks through like kind of the scientific type things of like how you're spending your money and getting the most happiness out of it. When you hear some of the recommendations where it's like, hey, spend money on experiences, or, spend money on other people. And it sounds simplistic, but it talks about the science about it. But one of the things it says is spend money on things that is going to save you time or stuff you just hate spending time doing. Right. So like if you just hate changing your oil, just pay $20 to have someone do it. Your life will be infinitely easier. Things like that, where obviously you're on a budget and everything, but spending your dollars on stuff that's going to save you time and save hassle, that's stuff that you don't like doing, it frees up the mental capacity to do all these other things. Right.
That like if you don't like doing something, it's sort of draining energy. Yeah,
exactly. Right. In addition to time, right. I'd recommend that book for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely a good tip. I mean, I started doing this farmer's market bag where they give it to me every 2 weeks. I used to like going to the farmer's market, but it did take a lot of time on the weekend to go, like 2 hours I didn't have.
Yeah.
So now I just like pick it up when I go to the Pilates class every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really want to go to the Pilates class, but I got to go pick up my bag.
That's how you get. It forces you so you can get your farmers market stuff.
Yeah, batching activities, watching Netflix on the treadmill, kind of like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I listen. So like on my commute, I mean, I have, like you were saying, it's like I have podcasts going at 2 times speed all the time. So time, maximum use of time is definitely good.
Yeah. So something that you recently changed your mind on. I think you'll see like, that guy with the 50 or 70 single family homes, right? Like guy definitely hasn't changed his mind on too many things, right?
Yeah. So I have kind of 2 things in mind there. So the first one is kind of back. I mentioned I have a son. One of the things I got into was this whole infinite banking concept. I'm still a big proponent of it. I think it's a great vehicle. And you've had podcasts about that subject before. But I've always used the thought of insurance as more of the sort of wealth building or savings aspect of it. But since I've had a son, now all of a sudden, one of the things I've kind of changed in mind is, okay, now I got to think about legacy and protection and estate planning and, what happens if I get a disability and stuff like that. As a younger guy, I think that's something I've definitely changed on. And then the second thing has been home ownership. That's something I kind of changed my mind on. My wife and I actually recently sold our house that we were living in. And part of that was a lifestyle decision, but also to free up cash to be able to go invest in some other things. I've definitely kind of changed my mind that, moving out of the house and moving into an apartment. Now I'm not full Grant Cardone, buying a house is the stupidest thing you can do.
Yeah, but he's the same guy who bought like a $5 million house himself, right?
I think it depends, right?
Yeah, it depends. Yeah.
It depends on your situation. Obviously we're obviously trying to do as much as we can financially, investment wise, but there's a personal aspect and a family aspect too. So, but that's something I've definitely changed my mind on. And fortunately my wife has been kind of similar in that thought process. So That's something we recently did and changed.
Right. I mean, you and I are both like in the early 30s, and like all our peers are buying houses and getting $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 mortgages, and like that's all their cash flow. Now they can't even invest. I mean,
I see folks who are, instead of going from, it's, like, so for me and my wife, we're selling our starter home, you see others who are building a home or getting a bigger home and buying a fancy car and doing all that stuff. And, that's great. I'm not gonna, you got to spend your money on what makes you happy. And if those things do, great. But, like for me, I'd rather, I drive my POS Ford for a while and not have a car loan so I can take that money and do something else with it.
I would have thought you were more of a Corolla guy.
I have a Honda now, so.
Okay. But I think you're totally right there. I mean, people, they kind of blindly go about this, and like, you know, a lot of guys will be buying that starter home that's a fixer upper. And it's like, I'm like, okay, so you couldn't afford a decent house and now you need to get a mortgage on this. And what's worse, you got to take all this money out of pocket and make these repairs. That's like really not a good idea if you ask me, but I kind of filter myself, and sometimes I just be quiet and I let it out in my podcast. So
No, some of those things, like it's funny because, you know, some of these topics are almost foreign to other folks, and you almost don't want to talk about it because, you know, it's like, what the hell are you doing? Are you crazy? You know, like, what? You don't think the 401k is the greatest thing in the world? What's wrong with you? Or, you know.
Well, what did I say? Like, you just tell them you're a government conspiracist, or like you think the government's out to get you. So it's more believable than.
It's more believable than I think it's a terrible thing. You know, or you're doing all this crazy stuff, you know, like, you know, like I talk about, it's like, sometimes you're just like, I'd rather not talk about it with some people just because, you know, I don't want those crazy stares or people thinking I'm crazy.
Yeah. Like, what are you on the phone all the time? You know, I just have another girlfriend, you know, more believable than what you're really doing. Brokers.
Yeah. What the hell are you doing late at night on the computer?
Yeah. This last question is kind of out to the, you know, yourself maybe a few years ago, you know, it hasn't gotten started. And, you know, in the seller's market, what would you say to invest in? Now, is this someone that maybe only has 20, 50 grand saved up in liquidity? You
know, you always recommend the single family house route, which I think, while it's not a requirement, I think that's a great step. You know, if you have, you know, the investable capital to do it, especially if you've never been, you know, if all you know is just your 401k stocks and things like that, that's a great step. Me personally, so, you know, I mentioned I'm in the whole cash value life insurance thing. For me, that's sort of like my core foundation and conservative base. That's where I see, for me, just as, you know, as things get frothy and things like that, I can sit there as sort of the war chest and be ready for an opportunity without really losing too much return there. And then, you know, the other part too is I'd say there's nothing wrong with sitting, if you feel like, you know, obviously you can make money and do investments in any market, but if you really think things are frothy right now, there's nothing wrong with sitting back, you know, in Hawaii and just waiting things out and doing things, you know. Yeah. You know, not that you're doing that, but, you know, because it's sort of like, you know, 100% of nothing is better than any percent of a bad deal, right?
Right. Sometimes it's the deals that you don't do are the best deals.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people that I went on a lot of podcasts, and they're like, oh, I want to do multifamily.
Yeah.
But I'm coming to this idea. I used to have this idea where you need to have like 30,000 a passive before you can move on. Mm-hmm. But I'm also adding this component of you maybe need like 150, 200,000 of liquidity to make it in that next step. Because if not, you know, you'll spend your money on a couple limited partnership deals, and then that's it. Everything just stops. You have no more war chest to do anything else. What's your thoughts on, you know, cash flow amount and liquidity to kind of make that jump?
I would say, like, to me personally, I don't know that you would have to have like some specific cash flow number in mind. Like, I wouldn't say like, hey, you got to have 10K a month coming in monthly before you even think about it, sort of thing. I definitely say, you know, I like that 150, 100 kind of range, like you're saying, where, you know, it's sort of like, you know, it's hard to say like drawing a line, right? But I'd say if you had that liquidity, maybe higher at 100, 150 or higher, maybe that's when you think about.
Because you came into this, you sold all your other properties and you had that.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of it too was I had properties and then still had some liquidity to be able to jump into my first limited deal too, right? And then so it was slowly hey, can I sell stuff off to build the war chest a little more? So, you know, and again, that goes back to me just being conservative and wanting to make sure I have reserves, cash reserves, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's ways to do it. And so I kind of correct myself a lot of times. I say most people should start with single family.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'd say it depends on the person, but, you know, I would say you don't have to. I mean, the other part too is, you know, you can get in as a limited partner and it's not it's not that much work. It's as much work as, you want it to be. If you're okay just looking at a statement every once in a while and getting a quarterly distribution, and that's really all the extent you want, hey, nothing wrong with that. You just make sure you do your due diligence and the work up front, and then you're fine. So.
All right. Well, I am going to put some of these other questions in the bag for next time.
Next time. All right.
So we can have you back on probably in the next, I would say probably next year. Because it's I would say it probably takes people a year and a half to break through and get that first deal. But after that, you're off and rolling, buddy.
Yeah, that's what I always hear. So the hardest part is patience, right?
And then maybe next time you can like put on a collared shirt when you've made it. Yeah. I just came back from work, so that's why I'm wearing this. If not, I'd be wearing the same thing.
Don't worry about it, man.
Brent, you want to get your email out there for people to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so my email is brent@hellomultifamily.com.
Thanks, Brent. Thanks for coming on. I think this is pretty useful for the folks.
No, awesome. I mean, thanks for having me on. This is fun stuff. So.
All right, shoots, brah. See you later.
This website offers very general information concerning real estate for investment purposes. Every investor situation is unique. Always seek the services of licensed third-party appraisers and inspectors to verify the value and condition of any property you intend to purchase. Use the services of professional title and escrow companies and licensed tax, investment, and or legal advisor before relying on any information contained herein. Information is not guaranteed, as in every investment there is risk. The content found here is just my opinion, and things change, and I reserve the right to change my mind. Above all else, do your own analysis and think for yourself, because in the end, you are the only person who is going to look out for your best interests.